Every spring, the story goes, she comes back up. Persephone is the girl who was carried down into the dark and came out a queen. The Greeks knew her two ways at once: Kore, the maiden gathering flowers in a sunlit meadow, and the dread queen of the underworld who sits beside Hades and holds the dead in her keeping. Same goddess, two faces, half a year apart. How she gets from one to the other is one of the oldest stories in Greek myth. A girl snatched into the earth, a mother whose grief freezes the world, a bargain sealed with pomegranate seeds, and the daughter who walks back out of death changed. And depending on who is telling it and when, it is either the bleakest story in the canon or a story about a woman coming into her power. Persephone is the daughter of Zeus, king of the gods, and Demeter, goddess of the grain and the harvest. Born of the sky and the soil, she ends up ruling the dead. Above ground, she is the goddess of spring, the green force that comes back to the earth each year. Below ground, she is the queen of the underworld, enthroned beside Hades, with the souls of the departed under her hand. The Greeks often called her simply Kore, the maiden, when they meant the bright daughter above, and Persephone when they meant the queen below. Her name is older than any of the explanations for it, and the Greeks themselves were not sure what it meant. It survives in so many wobbling forms that scholars think they inherited the word rather than coined it. The guesses run from she who destroys to a link with the sheaf of grain, to she who brings the light through. Nobody really knows. A fitting kind of mystery for a goddess who lives on both sides of the dark. She answers to many names: Kore, the maiden, when she walks the upper world, queen of the underworld below, dread Persephone, the awful one in Homer's mouth, and Proserpina, when Rome took her up. Picture her two ways: as Kore, young and flower-crowned, wreathed in narcissus and spring blooms; as the queen, tall and commanding on her dark throne, a torch in her hand, sheaves of grain at her side, and a pomegranate cradled in her palm. Her powers run through both worlds. She rules the dead in her own right, and she turns the seasons, greening the earth when she rises and letting it wither when she goes down. She keeps the secret of death and return taught at Eleusis, and she shows the dead mercy when she chooses. Her symbols carry the same double life. The pomegranate, seeds of ending and of life in one red hand, the narcissus that lured her, the torch from her mother's long search, sheaves of grain, and the pale asphodel of her underworld meadows. And her nature is a journey. She begins an innocent maiden and ends a formidable queen, merciful to the dead, but wise now to power, self-possessed, keeping her own counsel between two worlds, resilient enough to survive the dark and then learn to rule it. Persephone's greatest rite was the Eleusinian Mysteries, held each year at Eleusis, near Athens, for close to 2,000 years. Initiates were sworn to secrecy on pain of death, and they kept the oath so well that we still do not know exactly what happened in the inner hall. What we do know is the broad story they told. The mysteries reenacted Persephone's descent, her mother's search, and the daughter's return. Initiates went home unafraid of death, promised that what goes into the dark can come back. There is good reason to think the rite was older than the abduction wrapped around it, and that in its earliest layers it belonged to women. Her other festival was the Thesmophoria, a women-only autumn rite for Demeter and her daughter. The women withdrew for 3 days to fast and to call up fertility for the fields and for themselves, and the men were kept firmly out. Whatever else these festivals were, they were spaces the women of Greece kept for themselves. Persephone has one central story, and it is enormous: the descent, the grief, the bargain, the return. But the Greeks never told it just one way, and the variants are half the fun. The standard story is simple. She is the daughter of Zeus and Demeter, and that is the version most of Greece told. An older Orphic tradition tells it far stranger. There, Zeus pursues his own mother Rhea, who becomes a serpent to escape him. He becomes a serpent too, and from that union Persephone is born, strange and malformed, guarded by the Curetes, a long way from the sunlit maiden. But the Greeks kept both, and so will we. Persephone was on the plain of Nysa, gathering flowers, when she reached for a narcissus that stood taller and brighter than the rest. It was a trap. Gaia, the earth herself, had grown it at Zeus's bidding. The moment her fingers closed on it, the ground tore open. Hades rose up in his black chariot, seized her, and drove down into his kingdom. Her father Zeus had agreed to the match. Her mother Demeter had not been asked. In the oldest surviving telling, the Homeric hymn, there is no softening of it. She is taken against her will. She screams for her father, and later she tells her mother plainly that it was forced. Here is where it gets interesting, because this is where the tellings split. The versions that came down to us were written in a world run by men, and they are the ones that survived. That is not the same as the only story, or the oldest one. There is an older reading, kept alive by writers like Marija Gimbutas and Merlin Stone, that says something else was there first. A women's mystery of descent and return, sacred long before anyone added a kidnapping to explain it. Was it always an abduction, or did that come later? Nobody can prove it either way, and that is part of the fun. The truth you take from it is yours. And there is a third way to hold it that does not erase the first. Persephone is taken. But she does not stay a victim. She eats the pomegranate. She takes the throne. Whatever was done to the girl in the meadow, the woman who walks back up is sovereign. The maiden goes down, a queen comes up. When Demeter heard her daughters cry, and then silence, she went looking. For 9 days she crossed the world with a torch in each hand, eating nothing, finding nothing. It was Hecate, and bright Helios, the sun who sees everything, who finally told her the truth. Hades had taken Persephone, and Zeus had allowed it. Wild with grief, Demeter walked the earth as a stooped old woman, and came to Eleusis. A kind family took her in, and she tried to make their baby son immortal in the hearth fire, until his mother caught her at it and cried out. Then she rose to her full height, blazing as the goddess she was, and commanded a temple raised. That temple became the home of her mysteries. And her grief had teeth. With her daughter gone, Demeter let the whole earth go barren, nothing grew, the people starved, and the gods began to lose their offerings. Zeus was forced to act, and sent Hermes to bring Persephone home. But the underworld has a rule. Anyone who eats its food belongs to it. And before she left, Hades gave her pomegranate seeds, and she ate them. So they struck a bargain. Persephone spends part of each year below, and the rest above. How long depends on the telling, a third of the year, or half. 4 pomegranate seeds, or 6, accounts differ. What everyone agrees on is the rhythm. When she goes down, Demeter mourns and the world goes cold. When she returns, the spring comes back up with her. Once she is crowned, Persephone stops being a girl. Things happen to and becomes a power the other gods have to reckon with. When Orpheus came down with his lyre to beg for his dead wife, it was Persephone who was moved, and Persephone who let Eurydice go, on the one condition Orpheus then failed to keep. And when the hero Pirithous came down to carry Persephone off as a bride, dragging his friend Theseus along, the queen was not amused. Hades sat them down to a feast, and the stone seats grew into them and held them fast. No one carries off the queen of the dead. Homer calls her the dread Persephone, and the dead do not argue with her. But she can be reached on her own terms. The dread queen still chooses when to be kind. She is not the only one who made this journey. Long before Greece, Inanna of Sumer went down through the 7 gates of the underworld and returned. In Egypt, Isis gathered the broken body of Osiris and brought him back to life. To some readers, that is no accident. They are the scattered faces of one older great goddess, whose mystery was always the descent and the return, the seed buried and the green coming back. It is part of why Persephone's small Greek story has never stopped feeling like something much larger. She has had a remarkable second life too, reclaimed by modern storytellers, from the musical Hadestown to the webcomic Lore Olympus, always making the same move. From a girl who was taken to a woman who took a throne. Persephone refuses to sit still as one thing. She is victim and queen, daughter and ruler, the green of spring and the silence under the ground. Her story has been told and retold for 3,000 years, because no single telling can hold her, and because the people who retell it keep finding new questions inside the old one. She went down into the dark as someone's daughter and came back up as no one's but her own. Every spring, she does it again. Go down into the dark and come back up as your own.